Thanks, Avner and Jim, for letting me discuss this paper. I guess 2 years ago, Adriano discussed my paper, so now I'll try getting him to win the prize. We'll see if it works. Okay, so what's the key sort of insight in a nutshell? We've known for a while that durability increases the collateral value. This is sort of something that we've known. This, as Adriano pointed out, goes back to Hart and Moore. We've also known, but somehow the implications haven't been fully thought out, that if you take all else equal, the durable capital is going to be more expensive. So what's the key insight in this paper? The key insight is that the combined effect can basically lead to a larger down payment required for the durable capital versus non-durable capital. And the implication, and I must say the thing I spent the most time on is actually the colors, but some of them don't show up. Anyways. The key implication is that highly constrained firms are actually going to use the dominated capital. They're going to use the less durable capital because they're going to compare these down payments. And what's the important takeaway? Well, the important the important takeaway is that it's critical to distinguish between pledgeability and durability. And pledgeability unambiguously, increases facilitates financing. Whereas the point that Adriano is making is that net durability, actually, the net effect of durability impedes financing. Okay? So if this was sort of the last paper in the conference, I would say, okay, we can go out to ski. But given that there's another paper, I'll give a few comments. I like the paper a lot. I'll touch on a few points. I think the key point is very insightful. The one sort of question that lingers in the back of my mind is sort of in terms of generalizability. It's very clean within the model. The question is sort of, in general, is this a robust result or is this a feasibility result? Okay. In terms of notation, the things that are important, K is the capital, delta is the depreciation rate, and F of K, I'll talk a bit about F of K. F of K is basically the technology. It's a limited enforcement economy, similar to what Adriano and Vish have used in a couple of previous papers. And the key constraint, of course, is the collateral constraint. And if you look at the collateral constraint in this way, you see that depends on theta, depends also on the durability, delta, and you see Q, you need to think whether Q is a function of delta or not. And that's the key insight that Adriano points out, that if you ignore the fact that Q is a function of durability, you're going to reach the wrong conclusion. Adriano showed that. Just in terms of, keep in mind that mu is the Lagrange multiplier on the current period budget constraint. Mu prime is the Lagrange multiplier on next period's budget constraint. And lambda prime is the Lagrange multiplier on the collateral constraint. And we're going to see these are going to show up, and these sort of help Adriano make the points very nicely. Two types of capital. One capital is less durable than the other. And most of the discussion, I'll talk about the case with neoclassical capital. I'll touch a bit on the other case. I think it's very important to have the other case to make the point, but I'll touch on that later. So let's look at the down payment. So as Adriano pointed out, the down payment is going to be the difference between the price of the collateral and the present value of the pledgeable part. You can think of the Jorgensonian's user cost, and it's important to note that the Jorgensonian's user cost has two things that matter in this case. One is delta, one is sort of how durable the capital is. The other is the price of the capital. Now we know that the price of the durable capital is going to be higher because capital here is irreversible, is reversible, and that's actually important. So Q is going to be higher. What we'll need eventually is that the product of Q times R plus delta is going to be lower for the more durable capital than the less durable capital. You can write it in a different way. You can write the down payment as the user cost plus the present value of the non-pledgeable part. And remember that the entrepreneur can abscond with 1 minus theta, so that's essentially the part which is non-pledgeable. Now, what's the standard intuition? Standard intuition, take the down payment, take a derivative with respect to delta. You get that the down payment is an increasing function of delta, which means that it's a decreasing function of durability. But the price of capital also depends on durability. So when you take the derivative, you have to account for that. The blue term here is exactly the term that we had on the top here, but there's an additional term. This part is positive, but this part is actually negative. So what will matter is the net effect, because this part is negative, this part is positive. So let's assume now that we actually fix the user cost of capital. If we fix the user cost of capital, we plug that in as a function. We plug that in as for the price of the capital. We take the derivative. We see that the net effect is actually that durable capital has a higher down payment. Okay, and that's essentially the key insight that drives many of the results. And the model is very nice and very clean, so it's really easy to see where the results are coming from. And again, the point is down payment increases with durability. Now let's look at the user cost. So and think of the user cost of an agent that has a certain net wealth. There are two ways you can write this user cost. And remember that mu prime is the Lagrange multiplier on next period's budget constraint. Mu is the Lagrange multiplier on this period's budget constraint. So the ratio between the two is basically the firm's discount factor. Okay? So you can write it in one way as the difference between the down payment and this term that has the discount factor in it. But you could also write it in a different way, which is the user cost plus the term that depends on the non-pledgeable part. And importantly, it depends on the Lagrange multiplier on the collateral constraint. Now, an unconstrained firm the collateral constraint doesn't bind. Therefore, it's just going to compare user costs. Okay? What about the severely constrained firm? Well, now let's further assume that the marginal productivity at 0 is infinite. Okay? And this is going to buy a lot of tractability in this specific model. Let's look at the Euler equation. Now, what happens when the net worth of this entrepreneur goes down? Net worth goes down. It has to be that the overall capital, both types of capital, go down. That immediately implies that the marginal productivity blows up, which means that the discount factor has to go to 0. If the discount factor goes to 0, and we go back to look at sort of the user cost for this agent with W, you see that the user cost basically converges to comparing the two down payments. So the severely constrained firm is just going to compare down payments. It's not going to care about the user costs. Okay? So with two types of neoclassical capital, the unconstrained firms are going to compare user costs. The severely constrained firms are going to compare down payments. So now let's make additional assumptions. Let's make the assumption that the user cost of the durable is less than the user cost of the non-durable, and the down payment of the durable is higher than the down payment of the non-durable. And now that we get that in equilibrium, we're going to see both types. Essentially, the unconstrained are going to hold the durable. The severely constrained are going to hold the non-durable. Okay. Now, the paper has additional interesting results. I won't touch on them. I just want to point one thing regarding the two economies. So, and the reason I want to touch on this is I'll get back to this when I have a few comments. So think of a case where you think of sort of legal enforcement, and assume that in the country that has weaker legal enforcement, it's harder to pledge capital. Okay? So in that case, what Adriani shows is that in the country where legal enforcement is weaker, you're going to see that the constrained firms are going to use more the non-durable capital, and as these firms sort of improve, it's going to take them a longer time to switch from the non-durable to the durable. Okay? Now, in addition, Adriano has a version which he talked about where he has basically finite-lived capital. Now, why is this version important? The math is actually very similar to the math in the neoclassical version. But I think the reason that it's very important to have this as part of the paper is that in this version, these constraints that earlier were parameter constraints now actually arise endogenously as an equilibrium condition. Okay, so if in equilibrium you have the two types of capital, you have to have that these hold, and that basically shows that in that sense, the result is robust. He also has some implications regarding durability and rent versus lease that I won't have time to talk about. Okay, so a couple of thoughts. So again, I think most of these thoughts are either for the next paper, or those of you who think about potentially empirically estimating and sort of showing this thing, what are the things you need to think about when you do that? So the first point is that the pledgeability of the capital can potentially depend on how durable the capital is. So in this model, theta is the same for both types of capital. Now, if you think about, for example, a building, it's very hard to abscond with a building. So the pledgeability of the building is probably going to be, the theta of a building is probably going to be fairly high. And this is something that potentially is going to impact things, because again, the question is, what is going to be the net effect on the down payment? The second point I want to make, and that is in some sense an empirical point, is when you look at these two economies that have different legal enforcements, in the model it's very clean that the economy with the weaker legal enforcement, you're going to have more use of the less durable capital. But the challenging part for the empiricist is that these two economies also differ a lot in terms of the distribution of how many firms are actually constrained within these economies. So to show that the exact channel is the channel that Adriano is pushing for, I think is going to be a challenge. The next point, which you could view as a technical point, but I'm not sure it's actually literally a technical point, is I want to know what happens when the marginal productivity does not blow up at zero. Okay? Now the reason that it's important is that in this specific paper, because it's a very clean argument, you get it directly, it comes directly from this condition. So the question is, do severely constrained firms still use the non-durable? And more general, and I think this might be for a different paper, what conditions do you need on this productivity function in order to get the result that indeed the net effect is that durability is costlier? The next point that I want to touch on has to do with irreversibility. Okay? So in this model, investments are reversible, which makes it easy to analyze and sort of makes it easy to really make the point, and I think that the point is sort of very valid. One question that I'm asking myself is, well, what happens if there's irreversibility in investment? And specifically, durable capital is probably harder to reverse than non-durable capital. Will it still be the case that the price of the capital is going to be a decreasing function of this delta? Okay? Now again, that's important because that will impact what is the net effect of the durability. Let's see another couple small points. Yeah, so as I pointed out, the paper makes a very convincing job in terms of showing that durability may impede financing. For subsequent work, I think in some sense you want to sort of nail down the generalizability result. And one small point is, when Adriano looks at and shows that basically that the down payment is going to be increasing as a function of durability, he basically assumes, okay, let's fix the frictionless user cost, and that gives him this price for the cost of capital. And in fact, if you look at this specific case, in this specific case, it turns out that the user cost of the durable and the user cost of the non-durable are exactly the same. And in fact, what you want is sort of a strong inequality as opposed to a weak inequality. Okay. So in conclusion, I think it's a very provocative insight regarding the implications of durability. What I really like about the paper is that when you think about it ex post, it seems like a very natural result, and you ask yourself, okay, why didn't we think about this earlier? It highlights the fact that the more durable asset is in general going to require a larger down payment, and that has important implications. And as Ariane shows in the paper, that will imply things regarding to what happens to countries with different legal enforcement. He looks also at sort of the rent versus buy decision, and he shows that the more constrained firms are going to first rent the non-durable, and the unconstrained firms are going to purchase the durable. And at the end of the day, it really sort of highlights the fact that there's an important distinction between durability and pledgeability, and up till now in the literature, these two things have essentially been assumed the same.